Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our third masterclass for this series. I can't believe that we are already on day three. It's me, Simona Pillay from UJ, and if you were online yesterday, you would have heard my presentation. So I'm back. But today we are in for a real special treat. I'm going to introduce our speaker, and if any of you joined our Retail Fit event last year, you'd know that Miss Unati Kildase was very popular amongst our speakers. And at that point, she was presenting on supply chain. Since then, she's moved on to more of a customer experience related role. So I'm just going to share her bio quickly. Ms. Unati Kildase is a VP at Game and a doctoral candidate. Through a combination of varied organizational roles and continuous academic development, Unati's journey remains a work in progress, reflecting a belief that growth in the field should be ongoing. Over the years, Unati has worked as part of multicultural project teams to complex organizational challenges, including route development pricing, trade route negotiations involving South Africa, as well as export market development throughout Africa. This also included the implementation of integrated planning systems within the retail sector. Her academic and professional expertise has also enabled her to give back to the industry by mentoring and training aspiring women in logistics and freight. As a module developer and facilitator for Awiska, she helps empower nearly 100 women in 2019, some of whom have actually gone on to establish a successful business in the sector. So today, Unati's presentation is going to delve into understanding customer experience and take what we've learned from Masterclass 1 and Masterclass 2 and put it all together to really show us the power of technology in online consumer decision making and customer experience. Unati, we are so thankful to have you here today with us for taking your time out of your extremely busy schedule. And I'd like to hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive invite. I really appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to be back here and to be back with everyone. Retail becomes a passion. You don't find it, it finds you. So it really is wonderful to be here. Thank you. It's great to meet everyone, even though virtually. I always say at times, yes, the virtual landscape is a little bit of a challenge, but we do with it what we can. So I'm just going to share the presentation. Are you able to see it, Simona?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Great stuff. So today we're talking about a very exciting aspect for me in retail, which is the consumer experience and what technology has actually done in the retail sector. And I think it would be very disingenuous of me to not start from where we began. And before we even get there is, what is a retailer? Now, I know this may seem like a very obvious question or an obvious answer, but I think even within retail, because of the way in which the industry has migrated and changed, it has become a bit of a gray area when it comes to how we are redesigning our customer value propositions in determining if we are still retailers or we have become wholesalers or whatever else may be within the omnichannel space. And so to be very specific, it's really a retailer is a manufacturer or an individual who sells in small quantities to the public for own consumption and for final consumption. And believe it or not, this becomes quite a debate point between us as retailers, because you'll have some of the intermediaries that belong within potentially the same mass scale of an organization that may do both retail and wholesale. So now that we're past the definitions, this, in terms of the types of retailers I'm bringing in, because it was very cut and dry initially as a retailer to choose your niche. So you'd have your clothing accessories, and I'll just put up some brands while I speak. All of you know Leroy Merlin, which is in building materials and garden equipment. It's quite clear. You're not going to find clothing in Leroy and Merlin. You've got your House and Home, which will have your furniture and home furnishings. You've got your H&M. There you go. Which is clothing and accessories, electronic appliances, food and beverage, health and personal care. And I think what I want to show here, and this, by the way, is including your Sasols and your garages, because they do retail gas or petrol. So this is very simple and cut and dry. The customer value proposition is essentially simple. You know why you are going there. This is your retailer. What you want is where you're going, right? And I haven't come to the more complex ones as yet, that are your general retailers or general merchandise retailers, because we'll get there on some of the nuances and how they've developed. So let's go back a little bit. So the traditional customer purchase journey, and I didn't include the customer decision steps here because you have gone in depth into it. But initially as retailers, we didn't really have to look at that, because the purchasing journey or the customer purchasing journey was very, very simple. And as the retailer, we were the ones that were essentially in control and the decision makers for the market. So your trigger point was, why do I want to buy something? Because I need it. It was quite simple. You need to make a purchase. It wasn't driven by any AI intervention, any influences in any way. And then your interface with your retailer was your brick and mortar. So essentially, you had to physically travel to a store in order to get what it is that you needed. And this was before the boom in e-commerce, etc., which I'll speak to later. So why do I need something? Because I need to buy it, but I need to actually travel out to the store in order to get what I need. And then when it came to the market interface and how advertising was done, which is another touch point, it was the traditional media. So this little thing over here, newspaper. You had a newspaper out, they would deliver it into your mailbox when we still had them. And it would either be TV when TV was still popular and streaming was not a thing. And then you had your radio adverts where we still advertised in radio, which I'll touch on now as well as word of mouth. So essentially, there may have been some nuances in between, but these were the traditional methods of advertising to consumers. And as you know, with the rate in which you get news on TV, radio, as well as newspaper, if you were running an ad campaign, if you got it today and you got your newspaper today, you had to wait for the printing of the next newspaper in order to get new pricing. So pricing flexibility wasn't really a thing as a business that you had to pay attention to that extent. And then, as I said, from a shopping experience perspective, you had to visit the physical store, go aisle to aisle in terms of shopping for your products with your newspaper, because you can't bring your TV with you to a store, in order to find the products that you want. Now you can imagine price comparison at this point when you are in a store. You couldn't pull out your cell phone or pull out your TikTok in order to search, do they have this price better somewhere else? You would have to, if the other retailer that is competing with the one that you are in had an advert out, do your comparison. And we actually have some of our, I don't want to offend anyone when I say this, so I hope everyone in this room is young. You would have to actually pull out your newspaper for the older generation, and we still see it as well when we still do our store visits now, and we have some print campaigns where you'll have some of our associates that will actually pull out a newspaper, and these are the ones in the AI space, to actually check if the pricing is exactly what it is on the shelf. But obviously, it doesn't look like a little booklet anymore. Now, when it came to basket size, you were limited by the store hours for one, because the store opened at 8. If they closed at 5, it closed at 5. Your shopping experience ended there. You were limited to the product availability because, again, logistically, you could only travel up to a certain point in order to get your goods. So geographic proximity, and then as well as your spend, because your payment methods were also quite limited. So this is all going to link into how technology has really changed the game. And I know I'm going very prehistoric here, but we have to also think about when, as retailers, we actually started. And some retailers are actually as old as that. So if you can think back to that time, that is the transition journey that they've actually had to take in order to ensure that they meet the customer needs of the profile that we're working with today. So now payment methods, you had cash, you had a card if you were lucky, and you had a physical receipt that you were issued, and a little thing called a checkbook. Now, I've never owned one, but I have seen it in some museums and in some banks. But a check card was also another method of payment that you could use at the time. And then logistics, you as the customer were responsible for the transport. You had to go to your retailer. And that was also another limitation of your basket size, depending on how far you were from your actual retailer. And then the last loop is your customer experience feedback, which involves returns as well. Now, you can imagine if it takes this much for you to get to a retailer, if you have to go all the way back home, and this is if you have a car, which makes it a little bit better. If you have to go all the way back home and you figure out that the product that you actually bought from your retailer is not the one you want, the last thing you're going to do is actually go and make the journey in order to get a return on the product that you purchased. So it really was informal. So it was repeat purchases. So us as retailers, in order for us to see that the customers are actually adopting to what it is that we are providing, you would see it through the feet in your store. Customers would come back, word of mouth, but you didn't really have structured feedback systems that would actually help you to understand and gather more data on your customer, apart from what has sold out and what you need to purchase again, and how many people actually walk into your store. And maybe a small measure on your newspaper campaigns, but to gather that kind of data, depending on how many you distributed, was also quite a challenge. So essentially, this is where we come from. And I've put this picture in gray on purpose because it really was that old in thinking, but it worked. So the famous saying at the time from a very wise person is, he who owned the capex got the customer. Because if you were able to build your store within a customer proximity of enough people to come into the store, you would really be able to stabilize and say, this is my market. These are the people that will come to my store. The choice wasn't really on the consumer. So we were the takers, essentially. Now, the modern customer journey, and I love this picture because it really shows the complexity of where we are. And I know it's quite a popular picture as well. But what I want to actually do as a comparison here is to say, we always debate that the trigger is still the customer, right? Because we say the need is identified through social media, push notification, and online ads. But if you really think about it, at this stage where we are now, we are actually creating a halo effect around the customer. So at times you're sitting at home, you are searching through Instagram or streaming or whatever it may be, and a push notification will come to you of certain products. And then depending on your searches, it feels like Big Brother is watching, and all of a sudden you'll come across an ad of something that you may have spoken about that's linked to something else. Now, the question then becomes, was it really you that had the need for the product, or is it the suggestive nature of AI that we are now using? So those are some of the tools that we're using now, where the triggering system of a customer purchase is actually now sitting with the retailer because of the competitive nature that AI and technology has actually created. So I'll show you how we have adapted to some of the AI systems as well, and the Google searches, and how we actually integrate that into the customer journey to kind of suggest what it is that we would want you to purchase. And we use it as a form of marketing and advertising based now on the customer value proposition that we've built. So the competition has gotten so stiff at this stage from a retailer perspective that the trigger, in my perspective, is no longer the consumer, but the purchasing of the different methodologies of coming through to you as the customer and creating that effect around you to make you think, I need this. So now the retailer interface has gone from you going to the store and having to put on your Sunday best or your Wednesday best and go out into the actual retailer to shop, to you're sitting right here, you're sitting on your bed, you can sit wherever you want. So when we say omni-channel, we don't only mean the e-commerce website or mobile apps or social media stores or marketplace. It means all of it at once. So what we've now had to do is almost become the chameleons in one. So if you go back to that initial picture that I showed you of all of the different niche retailers, now as a consumer, I can be sitting on my bed. I will order a couch from, or let's say a chair, a bar stool from Checkers House and Home, and I order it online. and I think, okay, I'll click delivery. Now I've used my phone. And then I decide, actually, I want to see what this parcel looks like. So then I change it to say I want to actually go into the store to view it and I'll pick up. I get to the store, I see what it looks like. Then I decide, I Ubered here. So I speak to the people at the front of the store, and then I change at the point of sale to say, actually, no, I want you to deliver again. Now, all of this is one transaction journey, but you as the customer have completely interfaced the experience with that one retailer in an omni-channel manner. So you are shopping where you want, how you want, whenever you want, and in the method that you want. And then you may even get home and maybe your delivery is coming tomorrow. The physical store is closed, but the online interface and application with the store is still open. And then you decide, actually cancel the delivery. I'll go into the store and I'll pick it up tomorrow. So now there is absolutely no or limited restriction on when, where, how you can actually shop. It literally depends on how often it is that you change your mind and what it is that you want. And you can only imagine the amount of complexity that then creates in the background. Now let's go to the marketing interface. So now we don't market on TV anymore. I don't know about you, but I pay to not see ads. So what has happened is, from a customer experience perspective, you don't want to switch on your TV and your live streaming and you see 10 different ads about this campaign and that campaign and that campaign. You get irritated on YouTube if it breaks the video you're watching to show you something else. So what's now happened in the background as well as retailers is, in order to not irritate the customer, because we've seen that also has an effect on the consumer behavior of coming into your store. And I'll use Temu as an example here. I know that all of you, if you see that Temu ad in every single platform and you click once, sometimes it's an error, you will have ads and notifications coming out of your ears on every single platform. And eventually, at some stage, every now and again, it does get you, and you click on something, you leave it in your cart. Sometimes you check out, sometimes you don't check out. And as soon as you do that, it keeps reminding you you've left this in your basket or the price has decreased, because it's trying to entice you to actually purchase. So, from a marketing interface perspective, we moved away from television and radio. Again, unless you're driving and you're not listening to your music on your way to work or wherever it is that you're going, the likelihood that you're going to actually listen and absorb an ad that comes through on the radio is very small. So what actually happens now is that ad spend on TV for most retailers has actually got down to zero, because we found that it doesn't speak to the consumer experience. And what we've done is we've started to switch to social media, influencer campaigns. It's really become popular now to the point where it's been formalized from a marketing perspective in campaigns. And then you've got email, SMS, and you'll get WhatsApps that are also triggering and pushing the digital catalogs to you. So now you'll find that it is a multi-layered effect when it comes to the marketing interface, because the customer attention span is also shorter. And I'm going to use this as a repetitive example of how long are your TikTok videos. If now you watch something and unless it's a movie or a series, it's more than a minute or 2 minutes, you quickly scroll up. The ability for us to now scroll on to the next is so easy and has become so ingrained in how we think that if you don't catch the interest of the consumer quick enough and make it engaging in a very short time span, you do lose that opportunity for a potential sale. So your shopping experience, let's say now you've decided that, okay, fine, I'm going to go into the store. So now before there, if you think back to your 5 stages of your decision matrix, the first thing you do in how you do your research is, now you don't get your good old newspaper anymore. You go to your AI-driven recommendations. So you go to your Google search, you go to your different shopping and online platforms to check now your price variations and your price flexibilities. Sometimes you'll shop, you'll put something in your cart, you'll leave it there, and then you'll get a competing offer from another retailer that you'll actually check. And depending on what you like, that is where you may decide to check out. So all of those things are now different as well. And then let's look at your basket size. Now, there's no restriction on your basket size anymore, depending on how you want to shop, because you've got this 24/7 access, as well as your delivery method variability. So you can choose whether you want to pick up certain items, have some be delivered to your door. So it really depends on your span of how much you want to spend. And apart from that as well, with the bundles that are now being offered for purchase, you get to have a better deal in what it is that you're able to purchase. So the capability and the accessibility of what you're able to purchase is much more varied than what it used to be. And then, of course, you have your point of sale. So in our market, it is still quite popular and the general norm to have a teller behind the till. Someone comes and greets you if you're lucky, depending on the day, except of course if you come just before closing time. And so it's still quite popular. But what you'll find as well, and I'll use the example of Checkers Unique. In Checkers Unique and in some game stores as well, you've got self-checkout. So now it's starting to give the consumer that option as well of, do you want to talk to someone when you check out, or do you just want to go and do it yourself? Now, in the US, in that market, it's actually predominantly self-checkout. You will only find that you'll have people at your point of sale if you really need it, but you have to actually request it. So you'll find that you'll shop for yourself, you'll scan all your own items, and you'll get to the till and you actually scan out the goods yourself. Now, one of the questions that we asked when we went to our last trip to Mexico in April was, how do you ensure safety? How do you know that a customer won't just get to the door and they haven't scanned out all their items and then they just walk out of the store? So I think the rules are different in each market. In this market, I still think it's a little bit tricky from a security perspective. But what has been done is that at the door, you actually have another interface device that scans your entire cart as you leave. And it shows and it integrates back to the till to show if you've actually paid for all of your items. And then obviously then you become quite popular because it rings the bell, security comes, and I think you'll know the rest. So those are some of the interfaces that, depending on if a brand is national, it's local, or it's global, those are some of the things that are starting to come into our market as well. But the customer adoption is really not the same, because I think in South Africa, one of the things that's different is that South African still, shopping is still an event. People still want to go to a store. Payment methods. You can pay anywhere you like. You've got debit, credit cards, PayPal, mobile wallets, Apple Pay, Google Pay. You can pay with your watch, buy now, pay later, PayFlex. So all of those things are the alternative revenue streams that we are now having to open an interface to make that shopping journey more attractive for a consumer. I'll give you the example of a cell phone. A lot of retailers now are actually looking at how to extend better terms to consumers and offer those alternative payment methods, because you may want an iPhone 16, but you don't want to pay 28,000 Rand cash for it. But if I offer it to you at 300 Rand, you'll buy the cell phone, then you'll buy the SIM card. So now I'm creating that halo effect because I'm linking it technologically to the actual cell phone itself to make the sale. Logistics wise, as I said, you don't have to move off your couch. So for you, it's quite easy. You don't have to travel anywhere. You can shop in your pajamas. But now, from a retailer perspective, there are different methods of fulfillment that we have had to actually adopt to. And I'm speaking to the retailers that are also in existence at this time. So you can have the real-time tracking, click and collect, delivery. But now, as a traditional retailer, it's very difficult to transition because this requires building density close to your consumer so that you're able to fulfill. Because of course, when you do a click on your cart or you shop, you want your item now. You want it as if you were looking at it directly in front of you. So what happens is we're now building these fulfillment centers, micro fulfillment centers, hubs, and clouds in order to service that. And the radius is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller so that we are now able to fulfill what the customer requires. This has required a change in the truck sizes, a change in the average distances that are traveled, a change in the assortment that is kept in each of these hubs. Because now you have to decide on, does customer A shop a lot of kettles or maybe tea or water in this particular area that's within a 20-kilometer radius? If so, that is what you stock to make sure it's available. Or do I stock chairs in this particular area? Your logistics become so much more complicated when it comes to the omni-channel environment, which is why when I started, I said we are now becoming I would say, students of the customer need and the customer decision matrix, because if we are targeting a certain consumer, we have to encapsulate that consumer so that they don't want to go anywhere else. And of course, the last part of it is the customer experience feedback. How easy is it now, number one, to do a return? You literally just call up the vendor or you call up the third party to come and pick up the item. And a lot of organizations are losing a ridiculous amount of money in reverse logistics, because a lot of the time those items either go to the original supplier or the loss is actually taken by the retailer. And the customer experience feedback is in real time. Ratings and barcoding systems that are offered in tools now to measure our customer experience, which has now become part of the KPIs of associates that actually work in retail. You've got reviews, surveys, and of course, social media engagement. You have one bad review on social media and it goes viral and you could be done. And also loyalty programs. So you reward based on loyalty. And now the famous quote has changed. Now it becomes he, she, they, them who owns the data, uses it, creates an omni-channel network with a frictionless, tech-savvy, transparent experience with a varied assortment choice, as well as the ability to deliver quickly across all platforms while offering a great experience for a consumer wins the customer. Now, all of a sudden, the consumer becomes the one who owns and has all of the cards. And now, as a retailer, we are having to scramble to adopt. And not just from the retailer that is based in country. Remember what I said about CapEx and the ownership of CapEx? Now it's not about that anymore. It's because the competition is an online retailer. An online retailer who may have what we call a democratic marketplace. So as a retailer, what you do is, for instance, Takealot is a democratic marketplace. Not all of the products that you find on Takealot are actually Takealot products. And you find that with other suppliers that come onto the platform, they can offer products at a lower price point to drive down the price of Takealot. They gather the data in order to do a comparison on what the best product price may be, eventually, hopefully leading the customer to purchase their product if they come down to that price point. But what they sacrifice in certain times is that if they don't come down to that price point, you'll find the Takealot product is not actually the one that is purchased by the consumer. So these are the 5 stages 2.0. So as I said, these smart AI and tools that now exist that we're having to use are the AI-powered recommendation, which we believe are actually now the trigger that starts the customer journey, because we are now enticing the customer to come and actually purchase. So instead of you being the one to trigger and say, I actually need something, it's actually now to say, consumer, I'm advertising to you. This is what I've got. And this is how I'm making it more attractive to you. Come to me and come to my store or come to my online platform. And also using Google Lens. So as retailers, we actually pay in order to appear first or second in that search, and we measure those things. And it is quite expensive as well, because you consistently have to pay, depending on your assortment and how often your product actually changes, you have to pay for, from a technology perspective, how often that will appear. So if a customer sees it once, it appears again. It's the same as TikTok promote. Where we think that some people are really popular and actually they're not, they're promoting their videos. So the other area is obviously chatbots. I don't know how much all of you love Siri or Alexa. It really freaks me out because I'm not quite sure how I feel about an AI talking to me as if they were right here. But it is quite popular as well, where you ask your AI chatbots as well as speaking to WhatsApp, where it's actually not a real person. And we build those AI tools in the background. And then what we do is, based on customer data and frequently asked questions previously, we then put all of those questions together and make sure that whatever question you ask, you'll get an option 1 to 10 or whatever it is to actually answer your question, so that by the time you get to a person, it's actually very direct depending on what it is that you need. AR for virtual try-on is quite an exciting one, especially for clothing retailers, because there we do understand that sometimes sizing is very different depending on which retailer you actually visit. So then you get the option to say, okay, fine, this is your capsule wardrobe. I know all of you know about a capsule wardrobe, where we'll say, okay, fine, if you mix and match these items, this would be the best way in which to have this type of look. And some of those are driven obviously by Pinterest and some of the other AI tools that we work with in the background. And what that does is it makes that decision a little bit more clearer for the consumer as well before they go in store, and may even entice them to actually want to purchase the item online, so that the fulfillment doesn't actually have to put pressure on the brick and mortar store, which is now becoming smaller because of how we need to fulfill in the background. Online mobile shopping tools, I think you know all of these. So you've got your Amazon, Takealot, Shein. So your mobile shopping apps, the specific ones that you get will be your Nike, H&M, etc. And then, of course, your price comparison tools. And this is also one of those game changers, because now what we do is we are able also as retailers to compare our basket sizes. And this is where sometimes you'll see statistics that are released to say the basket size, the average basket size between Pick n Pay, Checkers, and Game is this much. And from a basket size perspective, you'll find that Game is cheaper. I know I'm being biased, but still, we are. And what that does is it helps the consumer to decide as well that, you know what, actually, I could buy this one item from Pick n Pay, but when I'm looking for my actual basket overall, I'm doing myself a favor by going to this retailer instead. Part of that whole halo effect of enticing customers as well. And then, of course, if you decide at any time at all, and wish list and cart as well, I've said where you'll put a ridiculous amount of things in your cart. I don't know about you. My daughter, who's currently 13, will put in sometimes about 10, 15,000 rands worth of items in a shopping cart. And obviously she doesn't have a budget or any money because she doesn't work. But it's really just nice for her to look at. And then what happens? I get all of these push prompts to say, you've left this in your cart. Do you know this item is on markdown? So that's another way as well that entices you to go back and think, do I still want to purchase this item? Now, if you decide to try and go in store, you really don't want to always stand in a queue, have to pull out cash. And what if you don't have any cash in and you're not carrying any? So that was part of the enablement as well in the consumer experience to say you can do scan and go. You can pay with your phone, you can pay with your watch, you can do self-checkout if you don't want to speak to anyone, you're feeling a bit grumpy that morning. Interactive kiosks that speak to you, those are actually coming into South Africa as well. So the interactive kiosks actually also show you price comparisons. They weigh your products, as well as contactless payments, which are, as I've said, you're paying with your watch or however it is that you want. So you've gone out for a run, you come back, you decide you want a smoothie, oh, I forgot my wallet, and then I pay with my watch or I pay with Apple Pay or whatever it is. And then after the purchase, the last thing you want is a long piece of paper asking, how did we do? Or maybe someone asking you, how were things? Can I ask you to fill in this questionnaire? So then what entices you to come back, apart from maybe a store looks nice? The loyalty and reward apps. You've got Woolworths, Starbucks, you've got Pick n Pay, you've got Checkers, and all the sorts. And then when it comes to your order tracking apps, if you're ordering online, DHL, DPD, there's nothing nicer than when you've ordered online to get that notification that says your item is being processed, it's been handed over to a courier. That's some of the technological interfaces that we've put in to trigger those messages. Because if we go dead silent, what are you going to do? You're going to go to a store, you're going to complain, you're going to be upset, and the next thing that you're going to do, you're going to purchase somewhere else. And it also matters because then what's going to happen there is that you're going to go into social media and say, I haven't received my package. Where's my package, etc. And then, of course, the feedback and review platforms. How many times do a lot of you go onto a website and you think, I don't know if I can trust this. Then you go to Hello Peter and you see the number of stars that were put on there. Those platforms are not there by design. There are teams now that actually sit and check them, because if there's a bad rating as an organization, I think all of you will understand that if you go onto a site and an organization has received a bad review, it does give some level of comfort if there's a response. Because as a consumer, it tells you that, okay, fine, I'm not dealing with an AI or a chatbot or a robot. It's an actual person that is responding, and this organization or this retailer actually cares. All of this has been driven by the fact that technology has invaded the retail space. So if you see from where we started to why do you buy something? Well, because you want to buy something. And how do you buy something? You go to the store. If I don't have it, you go home, you wait. Then you go back the next day or at another time, and you hope that it will be there. And the retailer really just had to restock according to how they were able to restock, according to the margins they wanted to make, and the sales that they wanted to make. Now it's an entirely different ballgame. The competition is not national, it's not local, it's global. As a customer, you can do whatever you want, and we now have to entice you. And technology interfaces are critical in how our businesses operate, because you can have the most beautiful store, but we've seen so many stores and retailers closing their doors now, their brick and mortar doors, because a beautiful store doesn't necessarily translate into sales, not on its own. So these innovations that I've mentioned, just a visual picture for you. So you've got your Google search. And this is a nice little device. Well, this is actually one of the ones that we have at Walmart as well, except there are plastic bags that have been put there. If you want a plastic bag, you can pack it for yourself. It's nice and open. So there you can actually see the picture of what it is that you want to buy. You scan the item, it tells you the price. If you have a discount card, you swipe your discount card, and essentially you check yourself out. And then obviously there are these are large margin items that are normally at the end, your consumables. So you'll have a pack of gum in your bag, but you'll want to buy another one. So a lot of the times, this is just to get you to do that extra little purchase before you leave. Or maybe you've been in the store for whatever reason for the last 2 hours and you feel like, oh, I haven't had breakfast. I need some sweets or I need a smoke. And then you have these. Now, these printers are very, very important in a store perspective, because if you have to have pricing flexibility, you can't now go and check and pick up a phone to say, what is the new price for this item? Or if it's gone on special and there's an error, how do I change the pricing? So now we have a lot of these labels that are actually either in aisles or sitting with the store associates to help them to actually be able to change the price points or to actually put the price on the items that you're purchasing if it needs to change. You've got these little scanners. So if, for instance, now a lot of associates will have tablets that they walk around with, and then you don't find a price on the shelf for a particular item, then you're thinking, okay, well, is it free? Of course not. So then you go to a store assistant and you say, what's the price on this item? Instead of them now having to go back to an origin point to check how much is the price of the item, click on the computer. You're tired because you're not patient and you decide to leave your entire basket. Now they scan the item. It shows on the screen what it is, including if there is a sale or a markdown. And that's actually helping them in that consumer experience. And you're happy because everything has been done so fast. And then, of course, there are the payment interfaces that we are very much involved with in the background with the banking sector, depending on the banks that you are obviously associated with, to ensure that consumers are actually able to then pay in the methodology that they want. And then this, the scanning functionality in store in order for you to be able to tap and go, whether it's with your card, debit, credit card, your phone, whatever it is. This, I think, is one of the most popular ones in store, because now you've also got iKhokha that you can just walk around with and then be able to help a consumer pay as quickly as possible. And it also serves as a backup in store as well, because as a consumer, things will happen. And even as a retailer, things will happen. We had load shedding at some stage. So then you have these backup devices at your point of sale to make sure that your customer experience is actually one that is valuable. I know you would have seen in some retailers as well, where you will have areas where if people are paying in certain methods, they'll separate the queues in that manner. And the one where you're paying by card, more often than not, is the one that is a lot easier in which to deal with. Now, all of this is quite fancy, but the real culprit that actually got us here is this little buddy over here, the microchip, because these are the primary technological innovations that have really driven retail. But if you think about it, the invention of the microchip and how it actually interfaces into all of these devices, your computers, your phones, your tablets, your functionality of your automatic systems in your car to take you to a store. The invention of the microchip, I think, is so underplayed and its development around the world because this little chip has really changed our lives in how technology is driven, the amount of information that we're able to keep, and how we are able to interface all of these different areas in which to build an omni-channel offering for consumers. So if you ever know who the culprit is, that little guy over there. Now, last but not least, the key challenges for us as retailers, there are many. So product depth and sourcing, how on earth do you source for consumers, even if you have a CVP that is clear, which is really difficult now. So the depth of your offering, how many assortments, how many SKUs do you have in a store? What does it do to your forecasting complexity? And then global sourcing, because you can't just source locally from the wide variety of products that customers want. How do you manage tariffs? And I know you know the word tariff is quite popular now. Lead times, quality control, shipping and fulfillment operations, managing last mile delivery, restocking and aligning with supply timelines. You have a campaign coming, your stock is on the water, can't control how that actually gets here. And then fulfillment decisions, how do you make those as a retailer now with all the complexity that is there? And then you have your distribution network strategy. So how do you plan your network? Where do you place your warehouses and your distribution centers? How do you work your demand forecasting? So you can use AI to prevent the supply disruptions, but AI is only as good as the processes in the background in order to service your customers. Because if you miss it once, often a customer will not come back. And then how do you optimize your inventory in the background to have the right stock at the right location for the right person? Price competitiveness. The margins are so low because as you know, as a consumer, you will shop for a special even before you get to a store, even before you click something on the card. So we have regular price wars that have reduced profitability right down to the bone, as well as hidden costs, returns, markdowns, storage costs. Those impact margin as well. And then cybersecurity, safeguarding your transaction and your data. If your card has not been cloned, please consider yourself lucky and touch wood, it never happens to you. But this is something that we are increasingly having to deal with, and is to protect a retailer's reputation as well as a consumer, because we now ask for your details in order to make sure that you have a better consumer experience. But essentially, it's your private information. So even though you may have a virtual card, you're still loading real money on it. So those are things that we now need to protect and invest in. And then as well as the supply chain risk, how vulnerable it is to cyber attacks and data breaches because of the interfaces and how those need to speak to each other in order to make sure that we'll fulfill in an omni-channel manner. So is all hope lost? In order to service this lady here who wants everything whenever she wants, in any package she wants, what do we need to do? Because now the famous quote is, he who gives the customer what they want, when they want, and how they want it lives to gain market share and beat the competition. So we have to be led by tech as retailers and be immersive in it, not just to better the consumer experience, but to reduce costs. We're automating our warehousing system so that people are not working as hard, and it enables us to schedule associates better and also train them better so that they're available where they are needed, and then helping us with that pricing flexibility. Customer obsession is the new buzzword, and I'll say new relatively so in the last 10 or 15 years, because loyalty, customer loyalty is what you want to gain. So you have to offer your customer as much as possible so that they stay. If they want alternative payment methods, you have to give them that. Niche advertising, you have to give them that. And these are some of the decisions that we're now having to make in the background in order to keep that consumer and to gain more consumers as well. And then omni-channel and immersive, offering the customer what they want when they want. So if you go back to that first page of the retailers that I had, it's very difficult to not become a general merchandiser. Pick n Pay is offering clothing, homeware as well. Checkers has also expanded. Game, Macro, all of these retailers are now no longer really niche, they are expanding into other avenues as well, because customers don't want to walk in, get one thing here, then walk into another place, get something there. Even on an online shopping experience, you don't want to go to different platforms in order to find the things that you want. And this is now leading us to hybrid retail for that experience. The same as hybrid working. And then sustainable and ethical brand alternatives. So retailers are bringing their own brands, their own house brands to service customers. And also, obviously, data-driven and agile. It's not a mistake that you get those push notifications. Those come to entice you to come and buy things that you know you don't need, but we know you may want, just to help you out as well. So that's the end of the presentation. I will now open it up for any questions.
Well, thank you, Unathi. I think you really merged what was shared in the previous two masterclasses and showed us the integration between technology and enhancing the customer experience. And it's clear that you come with a wealth of knowledge and expertise for days, and we're so lucky to have you here. I'm going to open the floor for questions and answers. If anyone has any questions, you're welcome to post them in the Q&A. But I noted down a few questions as you were speaking. And I think the first one relates to personalization, because that's what a lot of the technology is aiming to do, especially through AI. But what aspects or what elements of personalization do you think drives the most measurable value for retailers?
So I think because we have to now match, okay, firstly, it's the CVP. Everything needs to relate to your CVP. What do you want to offer? And then when it comes to that personalization, with the data that you gather in the background about what's happening with market trends, looking at what consumers are buying, those notifications start out as very general. And then depending sometimes even as we call it conversion traffic. So you look at the number of visits that you have firstly to whatever platform you may have or whatever advertising methodology that you have. And then we do a comparison of these are the top 10 items that customers generally search for. And then we look at also when that happens, where does the customer go next? So we actually follow that entire customer journey. When a customer goes on a website to say they went here first, then they went here, then they went here, at which point do they drop off and at which point do they continue? And then you have to marry that with where did the customer actually check out? Where do they finalize their purchase? And then you have to match that with what is in store. And then you look at the regularity and you start with those line items to say, these SKUs are the most popular, where should I fulfill them from? And you trace your customer data depending on where they were then purchasing from.
Thank you so much. I see we do have a couple of questions in the chat. A lot of them are comments saying thank you so much for an insightful presentation. One question from Retu Metse is, how can brands ethically use triggers like push notifications without overwhelming the customer?
You know, it's a very tough one because it's a very fine line, right? You can go overboard from a customer perspective because your campaigns to a customer are really not depending on the customer as well. So what brands can do for me, I think, is to give them the option. So the opt-out option is very important. I think that what tends to happen in certain instances is that we make it very difficult for a consumer to opt out or to have a choice of how we want to interface with them. So I think for me, it's important to first ask the customer, how do you want us to interact with you? And also in that selection, give them the choice of how often, and if they want to opt out, make it easy. How many times have you gotten push notifications where it says send the word stop in order to opt out? You send the word stop, your message all of a sudden doesn't get sent, or it doesn't happen, or you need to donate your liver and wait for 30 business days before it actually happens. So I think that is where the respect for the consumer comes in. Give them the option.
Thank you for that. Another question is, how can one integrate the fashion niche with technology?
So I think fashion is very seasonal, right? So you have to be very, very trend focused, and you can't follow every trend. But I think the use of social media influencers, depending on what you are targeting and what you're good at as well, because you need to make sure that you're stocking adequately to attract your market. and then what it is that will attach them together with those purchases. And I think that it's your assortment. You have to make sure that you have the right one. I don't want to go and shop for summer and then I'm finding tracksuits in your store, or I'm finding those on your online platform. And then the AR interfaces in terms of trying on the capsule wardrobes, those are also actually quite enticing as well, because they make the decision a lot less complicated. Because a lot of people, you'll find when they're shopping for fashion apparel, you'll be buying one item at a time. But if you have that virtual interface that actually helps them to put together the items, it helps the decision becomes much easier. And it also helps with that halo effect of making sure that they don't only purchase the one.
All right, thank you. We have a very, very active Q&A today, but very insightful questions. Another one is, as a retailer, should we continue investing in building long-term customer loyalty or focus more on staying relevant through trend-based, value-driven offers?
I think both, because your customer will determine your trends. Because you can be up to date with the best trend, but your trend will go out of fashion as soon as your customer decides it has. So I think we need to look at the current customers, but also the customers that are upcoming and what they will want. Unfortunately, we're now in a position where you can't only entice one portion of the generation, you have to entice the ones that follow as well. So I would say stay close to trends, but your customer is king in determining what the trend will be.
Thank you for that. Naledi is asking, what strategies can organizations implement to effectively manage the complexities of global sourcing while ensuring cybersecurity and risk mitigation?
Okay, so let me answer the first part of the question. So when it comes to global sourcing, right, you have to know what you're purchasing, why you're purchasing it, and for who. So I always go back to the CVP, because that'll determine how much you're going to invest and where you're going to purchase from. And I think that we can't run away from the responsibility now of tracking our supply chains anymore. Because you have to go back and ensure that where it comes from, depending on what it is that you're offering, you have to also make sure that the origin of where your stock is coming from is actually ethically linked, because that does come back to bite you. Now, when it comes to cybersecurity and protection, nothing beats being able to know who your supplier is. So we do still travel to go to suppliers, have those conversations, and have those regular interactions as well. Have your minimum order requirements depending on what it is that you want from your supplier, and keep a supplier relationship, because now you can't make it transactional anymore. Because remember, the supplier as well now offers your product not just to you, but to your other competitors as well. So do you want to have the share in the market? Or do you just want to have that offering from a variety perspective for your customer? And you have to make then that decision. And then you have to decide, what do you want to protect? What do you want to grow? What do you want to exit? And what do you just want to maintain?
Thank you for that. Another question, are interactive kiosks different from normal kiosks, and how can they be integrated to improve the customer experience?
Slightly different. So an interactive kiosk is one that is short of speaking to you. So you can weigh your products on your interactive kiosks. You can check out, you can go to your list of items, do a recheck. Works almost as a calculator as well for you to check how much have you bought, what's the add up of your items. And sorry, you said the difference between that and your normal kiosk.
Mm.
So I mean, in your normal kiosk, you'll scan the item and then someone is actually there behind the till, sometimes punching in the numbers. With your interactive kiosk, it is more AI driven, and a lot of it is really touchscreen. So it makes it very easy for you to just scan the items out. And it also has to do with the ease of the transaction and giving you the choice of whether do I want to talk to someone today or not.
Mm.
I think we're
I
becoming
see,
a little bit of an antisocial society when it comes to shopping, depending on how.
yes. I see there's a couple of questions that are kind of aligned to the same theme.
Yeah.
So the question is, if all of these retailers are tech savvy, how can you distinguish yourself in a competitive market?
What do you want to be known for? So your experience can't just be, because I can pull it from AI and say, what should a retailer offer to a customer? And it'll give you, you have to align your value to what a customer wants. You have to be attractive to your market segment. We all say that. But now you have to have exactly in what. So am I that retailer that's known for, let's say if you go to a Unique, the colors are beautiful, you've got the self-checkout, it's quite a wide variety in your offering. You know that if you go to a game store, the first thing you think about is pink. And then the next thing you think about, what are we known for? We're known for our food. We're known for general merchandise. What do you go to a Pick n Pay for? You know, you'll get deals. So you have to be very specific in what you want to be known for, because we can all have the generic objectives. But if you don't have that specification of what are your hero items that are actually going to drive your business, you are going to get lost in the mix.
I think that answers one of these other questions, which speak about ensuring a solid customer value proposition
Yeah.
in the space of technology. So I think you've answered that one as well. Um, Another one here is quite interesting, and I noted something down quite similar. So smaller retailers or even entrepreneurs, how or what would be your advice for them to include technologies and relevant technologies? Because, I mean, big conglomerates can afford all of these wonderful technologies, but as a small retailer, how can they leverage off this to stay competitive?
You know, you'd be surprised at how relative affordability is, right? Because you think that your bigger retailer is able to afford everything, whereas your smaller one is not. But if you think about it, when it comes to technology, the question you always need to ask is, what do I want to do with it? What problem am I trying to solve? And it does become quite repetitive, but you always have to go back to what customer are you trying to solve and what are you trying to entice them to do? And how are you going to get them to you? So I think that's the very first question that a retailer, small or big, and especially for a smaller retailer, you need to answer that, because it almost becomes a little bit easier for a smaller retailer because you can focus a little bit more and you don't have to use all of the AI tools that are there. I think sometimes it does become overwhelming because we say AI for IR, and then you think about all of these wonderful, weird and wonderful things to use. Sometimes it literally becomes about how do you make it easier at the point of sale if that is how your customer wants to shop? How do you make that checkout experience easier for them? How do you make it easier for them to find pricing? How do you make it easier for them to pay in alternative methods? So it's those little things, depending on what you want to solve for, that actually make the difference.
Thanks, Sunati. And I see the last question relates to demographics,
Mhm.
and it's speaking to various socioeconomic issues, or in this case, having customers in rural areas or urban areas. So, in relation to technological innovations, what is your advice in terms of having to consider these demographics and how they impact consumers and retailers?
So, you know, people may not have access to much, but the majority of people have access to a phone. And people are speaking with their feet, whether it's virtual feet or actual feet. We as retailers now need to go to the consumer. The consumer is not going to come to us anymore because someone else is offering the alternative of delivery. So that's one of the avenues where we can actually find our consumers where they are. We need to go to them. And that's where are you delivering in locations, or are you asking your customers to go and pick up? Where is the density of the profit that you are going to gain? And then you go to those customers. We're going to have to start making that shift.
All right. Thank you so much, Hunati. I feel like we were interrogating you towards the
No, it's
end,
fine. That's why I'm here.
but I'm very thankful to our attendees who posted such insightful questions, and everyone is just complimenting what an awesome presentation you have shared with us. And from our side, we want to thank you so much for your time. You've really given us a wealth of knowledge to digest, and hopefully we can engage in future and see you on other UJ platforms as well. So thank you so much, Unati, and I wish everyone a good night, and we will catch up in our last masterclass session tomorrow. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks. Good night.